it's a great point, which is what I call a passive global or active. Like, at what point do you transition to making it a proactive part of your plan? I think that, first of all, if you haven't gone on your site and seen where your traffic's coming from, that's like something you should all do right now, right after you're done listening to this. If you haven't looked at your Instagram, your TikTok feed, your Facebook feed, any of the feeds to see where people are coming from, that.
Welcome to today's episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast, where we dive into the dynamic world of e-commerce and uncover the tools and tactics that empower today's emerging entrepreneurs. Our podcast is part of our community with the same name. The community is geared to providing emerging e-commerce entrepreneurs with courses, content, and coaching to help you all launch and grow successful businesses. Check us out at ecomrevolution.co. Let's get things started. Welcome back to another episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast. Today's guest is a global trade expert and a leader in helping e-commerce brands expand internationally. Josh Halpern is the CEO of Getting to Global, where he assists small and mid-sized businesses in scaling through partnerships with entities like the U.S. Department of Commerce, Amazon, and FedEx. A former U.S. diplomat, Josh launched the Department of Commerce's e-commerce innovation lab and represented major U.S. brands such as Estee Lauder, Harley-Davidson, and Tiffany & Company in China. He's also the creator of Culture Agents, a comic strip series promoting global mindsets for kids. And one of my favorite things that he does, he is the force behind the Vanbassador, driving social commerce across the United States, helping people go from local to global. And it is a great podcast. He puts a lot of effort into it, driving everywhere in this incredible looking van. You've got to check it out. We'll put it in the show notes. So if you're considering taking your e-commerce business global, this episode is absolutely for you. So without any further ado, please welcome Josh to the E-commerce Revolution podcast. Josh, it is wonderful to have you here.
Raman, great to be here. I always love listening to your podcast, so thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Well, this is an important topic because I think a lot of people, maybe especially now, they're unsure of, international trade. They're unsure of maybe going, but they're also very intrigued. Where's their first step that they take? Do they go to Canada and open up shop there? E-commerce wise, do they go across the pond? How does it all work? Or should they just stay put here and continue to work in the work on their business in the United States? So I think it's a great topic. And I know there's nobody better than you to, expand on these areas. I want to make sure, did I get all your accolade, everything about you correct?
What anyone needs to know, just send it to my wife, let her remind. But
I
yes,
love it.
But that's a great, look, to answer that first question, it's the worst answer ever, but it's the most accurate, which is it depends. And the reason it depends and the things that need to look at, there are real answers. It depends on your price point, how much your product weighs, because there's incremental ways to go global, and then there's the deeper all-in where you're moving inventory. It depends on if you have already a group of people following you and interested in your product. So much of that depends. I can give you some examples. We have a company that has homeopathic baby medicine, amazing, the leader in the space. Everybody, the brand. They want to go global through e-commerce, but the problem is their products are very small, and the price points are very small. B, people need it within the day or 2 days. Your baby's crying. You can't wait a week. So they really struggle to go global through e-commerce, but they do look at distribution and they do work on that side of it. Other products we have that are appropriate for example, a company that has a really good following in Colombia might look at it and say, look, it's hard to get there. It's a lot of work. We haven't built up the infrastructure. We don't have cross-border payments, et cetera. But we have the number one issue solved, which is we've got an audience in Colombia already looking for our stuff, right? So these are the depends kind of answers.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's and I think that speaks great to the some of the when part of it. So, but why? Other than the obvious, I could make more money elsewhere. What reasons do companies and brands consider that international expansion. Why should they do it? It sounds like a lot of work sometimes.
Yeah, it's well, again, if you have a product that can ship easily, you have already a built-in audience. What I like to say is you find your tribe. And so if you have a tribe, for example, an example that I like to talk about is rock climbing gear. If you talk about rock climbing gear, why would you sell to the people who are spending their days in the spa and never going out, never putting sneakers on, but they're down the block? Geographically, they're right there, but they're never going to buy your product. Go sell to a rock climber in France, they're more prone to buy your product. So the sale cycle is quicker. But of course, the logistics and the payments, all that stuff is more challenging. But I believe that today, in the world that we live in, you can be global day one. It's just a question of understanding, what does it mean to be global, and do you have a tribe out there that you will be able to convert easier than the local geographically tribe in your country? And what that means is, okay, you've got and again, I don't know if I can say brands, but services that we use. Avalara is a tax company. There's other companies like that. They can deal with the mitigation of your duties and taxes. So okay, that solves that problem. Then you've got an on-site checkout stuff like a Zonos or a number of other companies. Cross-border payments. You've got payment companies that will reduce the FX charges you've got. They'll repatriate your funds quicker. They'll even keep money in country without you opening up a local bank account, so that you can actually pay out other service providers and marketing in country without bringing money back and getting hit twice. There's lots of problems that you discussed, and what you rightly said, sounds like a pain in the ass. The more of a pain in the ass it is, the more there's been a company that says, hey, you know what, if we solve for this, people will pay us for it. And that's what's happened.
Right. No, that makes absolute sense. And I can think back to, when I was running my e-commerce business, we started to target Canada. And I think that sometimes that's the first step, right, in international. You start looking at it. Sometimes maybe we don't think that, Canada is international. It is. And duties would always come up as an issue. And, that was a way back. Now, you're telling me that there is technology in place to make it, solve that problem. And I guess really, if the brand, and this is something that comes up with a lot of our clients, they start to see orders in Shopify, right? They start to see traffic coming from these countries to their site. They then maybe get an inquiry or two. Is that the right time, to start looking internationally if you start to see traffic coming from your site? Or should you be looking at other elements like, how big is does my brand have, or does my product have an opportunity over there? I think that traffic gets people excited.
It's a great point, which is what I call a passive global or active. Like, at what point do you transition to making it a proactive part of your plan? I think that, first of all, if you haven't gone on your site and seen where your traffic's coming from, that's like something you should all do right now, right after you're done listening to this. If you haven't looked at your Instagram, your TikTok feed, your Facebook feed, any of the feeds to see where people are coming from, that's the number one thing. Because as you said, like, it's getting that audience. If you have a built-in audience that's looking for your product, that's the biggest challenge to solve for. And with Shopify, if you're on Shopify, you're already global. You click the box and you've got, you're doing global markets or whatever they're going to call it today. That's powered by, Global E, and then there's Flow.io. All the embedded kind of undercarriage of what Shopify does has already been solving for those issues. And if they haven't, they've got a plugin that does. So you should be able to say yes to global. If somebody, put it this way, if somebody said, hey, I don't care how much your product is, I want it, are you able to say yes? You should be able to say yes in today's world passively in that way. Now the question is, okay, do I put marketing dollars behind it? Do I move inventory closer? Do I set up a local site? I would say that the last thing you do is probably set up a local site for a number of reasons, but you should be if you are a marketplace type of product, you can easily be on an Amazon and do multi-channel fulfillment on an Amazon in country. And it's relatively easy to do. And yeah, you may give over some margin, but you know what? You're not going global on day one trying to make money off of that. I would say you're trying to establish whether it's a viable avenue for sales, and you'll make money after you build up reduce the costs and build your capacity over 6 to 18 months. But
Okay.
it's not something. I did this with Paris Hilton skincare when we launched that, which is now defunct for many reasons. Um, don't always go into business with celebrities, but no offense to her in any way, but there's a lot of
Sure.
complications to that. But when you look at selling into, let's say, Germany, we decided to do a pop-up there that was free shipping into Germany. We did not expect to make money off of that. We wanted to establish that if the barriers were gone, would people want to buy that product? That's a wonderful way to test. And this is, tell me, you can cut me off at any time, but this is an interesting hybrid model where you say, hey, we're a traditional business in the US. We have distributors, we sell, let's say, brick and mortar, or we're a direct to consumer in the US. But overseas, we may want to pass that buck over to an in-house distributor. Most distributors today are not saying, I've never heard of your product, but maybe it'll work. They want to know, okay, what's your following already? Do you already have sales, whether it's D2C or not? If you have people on your Instagram or TikTok, et cetera, that's a market kind of barometer for whether you might resonate in that country. So if you are, then you start to say, okay, do I place my inventory in market? No, not yet. You put it in a marketplace, getting traffic. Don't worry about making money. Because your distributor, then you can tell your distributor, hey, I've got sales already. Yeah, we're not making money because I don't have shipping, but I'm going to ship a whole ton in bulk to your warehouse. You just need to prove that you have an audience and people willing to buy it.
Right, right. Well, let's touch on shipping just a little bit, because I think
Yes.
this is maybe one of the areas that it's a massive confusion just here in the United States to figure out what you're charging for shipping. If I'm a smaller brand, but I've been doing well in the United States, and now I'm ready to go, and I'm getting I'm getting a lot of interest both on marketing through Instagram and TikTok, and from just on my site, I'm seeing traffic from the UK maybe, or other countries in the EU. Am I going to ship from the United States to those countries, or am I going to find a fulfillment center that has like a ShipBob that has a relationship or actually has fulfillment locations in the EU? What's the best approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sadly, and I don't, it depends on, again, the
Sure.
weight of your product. If you've got liquids, that's going to be a problem. If you've got lighter product, you certainly could start, and probably should start, going direct to consumer from the US. It's not going to be the most economical, understandably, but you'd be surprised how much some of this stuff costs to ship when you use, as you said, like the ship station shipping easy / easy ship /
Yeah.
Bob and his brother's uncle, right? All of these wonderfully named folks, but they do aggregate for a small business. They aggregate, and then they use their buying power to get you reduced rates. And it's not, it depends what your margins are. If you're a cosmetics and skincare, you probably could pull it off. And we've done that in the past. If you're, as I said, the homeobot, if you're $10.99 for a purchase and your average order value is $45-50, you're not going to want to do that. So you're going to have to figure out, and one of those options right now, and again, I am not proponent of any one particular service, but Amazon multi-channel fulfillment, I've been exploring a lot over the last year, because they went from, if you're familiar with FBA, of course, the FBA model, multi-channel means use FBA, but fulfill off of all your channels direct from the same warehouse. That's great in the sense of, in their 5 countries where MCF now operates, including the UK, you can ship all your products into Amazon's warehouse in the UK, and then you sell off your website, Instagram, even Walmart, et cetera. You can fulfill off of that same inventory. You're going to pay for it, but your problems to solve when you're going international are making it easy and building the efficiencies. Then you can start whittling away at those costs and bringing up your margins as you go, chiseling away over time, but don't expect it to be a revenue generator. And that's a thing, that speaks to the culture of the company. You've got to really ask yourself, or if you're a part of an international team, but there's another CEO group and board, is your company really ready to weather 6 to 18 months not making revenue, regardless of how much you sell, because of the cost of building it, because they have a long-term vision? Or are they saying, hey, I need to add some extra cash in here? Well, this would be great. Why don't we just go into a new country? That's probably not going to work, because passive doesn't ultimately generate. You just don't get the efficiencies in there.
I like it. Well, that's good. I mean, so evaluate the challenges of getting in there, and definitely shipping is one of them. And maybe it can be done from here, but potentially looking to a third party to help you out in that
Yeah.
situation, using their buying power, essentially.
Exactly. And Ram, one other thing that you were mentioning, I mean, I think it's important to figure out where you're shipping to, because there are certain markets where reverse logistics. So if you're going back into China, for example, and I'm not suggesting you do, but it depends on the product. But if you're selling back to China, shipping into China is often cheaper than you think from shipping out, because of the reverse, the empty capacity, the overcapacity in reverse kind of,
Right.
if you're doing, if you're able to go through sea. But it depends on where you're going. I've had probably some of the biggest challenges actually are not US to the EU, because it's historically something people have worked out and ironed out. Latin America has been a challenge to get the right logistics companies in selling and shipping into Latin America. In the last 2 or 3 years, it's improved. I think COVID also helped, but it's expensive to ship into Colombia and Peru, which is oddly actually a good opportunity. But Mexico has worked its way through a little bit better, but still.
Interesting. And the other, coming from China, I mean, this is where Temu and Shein and companies like that have utilized that. I guess the law of it's everything under 1,000, if I'm not mistaken, $1,000. But that's being challenged now, I think.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier when we were chatting about, like, kind of, gosh, where is the world going to be? Understandably, there's always going to be ebbs and flows in trade wars and all that fun stuff. But what's historically been the case is that Temu and not just Temu, I mean, tons of big US companies do this, where they place inventory in Tijuana, they wait for the purchase, they label it, and they ship it direct to consumer cross-border under the de minimis from Tijuana. In 2 days, it's arriving at your door. No one's the wiser, and they're under the de minimis, and they've paid none of these wonderful duties and taxes, right? So they now do it direct from China too, because they've built out that efficiency, but it takes a little longer. That's not just a China into the US thing. It's tons of these US companies that have been manufacturing in China for years. The small and medium ones could do it too, but they just took a while to figure it out. By the time they figure it out, Congress or the Senate is going to probably close that loophole.
Right.
It's not a loophole, just that de minimis number.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about marketing, because if I've solved my shipping scenario, I'm ready to move into X, whichever country it is, or countries that, is it, what happens with marketing? Am I going to have to learn that culture? How do they get marketed to? There's obviously, when you go elsewhere, there are different marketing channels that work better internationally than they work in the United States. Well, what does marketing look like?
Yeah, and it gets me excited when I'm listening to phrase that. And it's kind of, again, it's never been an easier time to go global for a small and medium business. Yes, it's got some challenges, but you have, as you said, you can solve for logistics, you can solve for payments, you don't need global bank accounts, you can solve for duties, duty and tax calculations, everything. The number one challenge is marketing and getting in front of your audience. Now, it is costly, which is why I say start with where you have an audience and figure out what that looks like. But I will say that it's also never been truer that the same marketing message will resonate with your tribe overseas as it does in the US, because people are digesting similar content, and the formats of which are TikTok and Instagram. It's all really social media. So you don't have to change the format. It's the same grouping. It's the same vertical form video, short form clips that we all in the world have an attention span of a flea now. The universal attention span is 7 seconds.
Wow, is it really? Is that an actual? I feel like it is.
It is. I mean, the thumb, what do you call it? Scroll stop. You got to be 3 to 5 seconds. It's that first 3 to 5 seconds. So if you're marketing to an audience, the good news is you don't have new formats. Whereas back in the day, you'd be like, well, they only do catalogs and they do billboards, and it's like, Jesus Christ. So I do think that when you say content specific, you definitely have to know the nuances. And now that is changing, where people don't want the American story as much in this current time. That may and hopefully changes again, but that was definitely the case 10 years ago, or maybe more, where you had just the story of it's made in America, it must be good. That is not the case. But it's made on a farm in Maine, and here is the farm. That is a universal message, apolitical, It depends on the product, obviously. But if you are, if you're a sweater or you're a certain fabric and you're showing the farm it's made in, or you're a beef jerky, I'm doing a training right now for 10 companies up in Maine on global expansion through e-commerce and just general e-commerce optimization. And it's it's a wonderful to be on the call because everybody's like, oh, I got buckwheat noodles. I got all this stuff. Telling these stories, though, does resonate everywhere. So definitely take that into account. Now, what I have seen too, in the beauty of AI, again, ups and downs, but the AI, you can take your sweater that you've made or your shirt or your socks or your whatever, and you can say, hey, you know what? I want 7 models to wear this sweater. I want them to be from Southeast Asia. You can use AI and you can actually have 7 models from Southeast Asia that are all AI wearing it, and it looks very good. Sometimes a little too good. I don't know why AI is still super biased against people who have normal curves. They love very thin people. I've actually tried to type in, give me a fat person wearing the sweater, and it refuses. Now, I'm sure that's changed because every week is different. But I did do this talk on the future, and the future is kind of here on AI and e-commerce around marketing. And that's definitely a thing that's unprecedented, is you can do a backdrop and you don't have to do a photo shoot on the beach in the Bahamas to resonate with beachgoers in Latin America. You can just make whatever you want. So
it's a fascinating point, and I did get to see that. In there's a, I'll find the name of it and put it in the show notes. But the client took a picture of herself wearing one of her outfits, very simple picture, and then uploaded it and ran it through this AI program that put it on all those models, literally put that outfit in all these different, it's quite amazing. And imagine what kind of time that saves. Exactly. And all of a sudden now too, you're culturally, you're being respectful, right? You're not, putting that American look necessarily in that country. You're putting the look of the people in that country. And that's probably a very important element.
Agreed. Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you take the same thing you're doing in the US, but put the lens of what would you need to do internationally, and now you type in, you know what, I need to do a marketing campaign for France. Tell me the top holidays, the top slang that's of today. I need you to rephrase all my marketing content. I feel challenged by all the people who are localization experts and translators, because I really think that's one of the things that is so easy to do now with AI, where I think that the next step of that is saying, hey, that's all commoditized now. Everyone expects to see localized messaging. It's very easy to do. So what does that mean? It means your competition is higher because every person next to you is doing it, which speaks hopefully to the degradation of kind of the, let's say, shotgun approach marketing and the opportunity to be a real person. Nothing can beat you specifically speaking about your product, showing your product being made, and you telling your story, and then reaching out, which is another question around B2B versus B2C. We can talk about at some point.
Right. Yeah. I was experimenting with HeyGen, and a fascinating program that records you and then records all your movements and puts it in there, and then you just put the script in there. What you want to say, and here we go. And all of a sudden now I can be speaking into the camera about my product, but in a completely different language, and presenting it. And listen, maybe if you're to the trained eye, you look at it, it might look a little AI-ish, if you will. Sure. But for the most part, it's going to be viewed on a small screen. And now I feel like there's this company took the time to speak to me in my language. It might be, interesting for me to evaluate that product. Maybe that's something I want to buy. Yeah. Now, just on the marketing side and AI, because I find this, fascinating, and a great opportunity for smaller e-commerce businesses. Let's say I have a complete game plan on content marketing here in the United States. Maybe I take a blog and I turn a blog into multiple social clips and take that repurposing model. Can I essentially then just take what I've already done and, go into AI and say, listen, I'm now going to be selling in Germany. I want you to take the same content. 1, I want you to translate it. 2, I want you to make sure there's a German, flair to it. Make sure it's, it would be well received in Germany, and then see what it comes out. Have you seen that in action? Is that doable?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, the professionals who make money off of you paying them for doing all this stuff would say, absolutely, nothing
Right.
beats if I'm sitting here as a person who I enjoy a good hack, yes, do that. Because guess what? I'd rather you try it and do it tomorrow than wait 6 months, pay $10,000, both of which might not result in anything. Find out now, fail early and often. And truth is, you're not going to fail in that respect. You may not get the conversion you want. So you go in and you have a German friend read it. But start there.
Yeah.
I love people who sit down for 6 months. They've got the whole marketing plan, and they've got to, localize it, and then they put the little words, because in the UK they don't say garbage, they say rubbish, and you just would never resonate. And you're like, I'm not sure if it's going to affect your conversion, so let's test it. And B, people might like the fact that you're slightly off, because it means you probably aren't, super tuned on it, because you're authentically from the US. So.
Right. No, that's great. Well, let's talk about something a little more boring than marketing.
Sure.
Payments and payment gateways, and you mentioned Shopify, and Shopify has Shopify Markets, and you can turn all these things on. Is that really just as simple as that, going forward, or is there something more that I need to worry about? You mentioned bank accounts, potentially being set up here in the United States. How does that? Just a little more detail on that would be great.
Yeah. So basically, the short answer is you can turn it on tomorrow with Shopify. And I think ShopPay. I don't even know if they still call it that. I forget. But look, Shopify is a payments company first and foremost. Everyone thinks it's an e-commerce company. It's a Stripe white label. Right. They are making a lot of money, and they're costly. They make it very easy to do. So it's wonderful to just look, if, as I said earlier, regardless of what it is, logistics or not, get to the point where you have such scale that you can start taking a look back and say, where can I trim off some extra fat here? That's a good problem to have. But if you are at $1 million, let's say even just $1 million GMV a year, so $1 million you're selling gross revenue out there, that's enough of a point, even $500,000. That's enough for you to take a look at some of the plugins that are on Shopify, or if you're not on Shopify, looking at, I use AirWallex. When I was GM briefly for Shopify's biggest competitor, Shopline, over in
Asia.
Yeah, it's another podcast. But they used AirWallex, and it was actually really good solution for reduced payment, reduced costs. Payoneer is another one for marketplaces, both recuperation of your funds and facilitation of funds. I'll tell you the overall concept of where things are going, regardless of the name of the company that does it, which is you've got these companies that are transferring billions of dollars in multiple currencies around the world. They've got bank accounts in 12 to 50 different countries. You basically ride their rails. So you would say, hey, I don't have to have a bank account in 12 countries. I'm going to become, let's say, an AirWallex or a Payoneer client. They will set up these virtual bank accounts for me in these markets. And then when Amazon pays me out, the bank account I list on Amazon is not my US bank account if I'm in the UK. I list my UK bank account in Amazon on my profile. Amazon pays my UK bank account at the UK pound to pound. And then AirWallex, and essentially it's an AirWallex or a Payoneer, and then they will take that local currency and they'll either hold it for you there in your virtual bank account, so you can pay out local, let's say, marketing partners or suppliers, etc., or they'll bulk it in and repatriate it to you at a cheaper FX rate because they've got bulk. It'll also be repatriated quicker because they're going from their UK bank account to their US bank account and then locally into your bank account, as opposed to Amazon paying their Citibank, let's say, account in the US that then pays their Citibank to your US bank account. And that's going to cost a lot of money, and they're going to take that percentage.
Interesting. And is there a benefit? I mean, I always think of exchange rates, maybe, I keep my money over there,
Yes.
Depending on how the economy is going on either side.
Well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, one more benefit to that type of, let's go like localized bank account model is decline rates. So if you, and they've improved a lot on this, but if you are on your website, let's say, and somebody buys your product from France and they've got, let's say, 10 email accounts associated with that same credit card, your US, let's say, bank or company might reject that and say, this looks like a fraudulent purchase. And if they're operating with another, if a French consumers bank is operating with your French merchant bank, they will likely not decline it as readily. That's good for you. You want a reduced decline rate, or let's call it increased auth rate or authorization rate. That means that you're doing all this work to get somebody to buy your product. Geez, I can't believe you're going to reject 30% of my purchases because you think they're fraudulent, when the reality is most of them probably aren't. And even the ones that are, it's better to get that better auth rate, because in most cases, unless you're talking about really rougher countries, most cases you're going to win out net overall. So that's a decline rate issue. To answer the other question you had, which was kind of more about what are the benefits of keeping money in market. Multiple ones. Let's say, for example, you're selling into a same market where you're producing. That's the easiest one, which is I've got to pay a manufacturer in Germany, but I'm also getting money in from consumers. In the traditional way, if you don't have a bank account there, you're going to send all that money back to the US. And then a month later, you're going to send money back to the manufacturer. But what I like, it's more universal, is marketing agencies. Most of us might have a marketing agency in that country, or distributors. I mean, marketing agencies, because there's ways to deal with distributors. Marketing agency, it's a straight up cash into the marketing agency. Why would you put that back in the US and pay double the FX rates?
Right. No, that makes absolute sense. I feel like these are some, these, like, again, the shipping and the payments, the boring stuff, if you will.
Yeah,
it's the complicated stuff. It's, you got to be aware of things.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, my eyes glaze over when I talk payments and logistics and customs more than anything. But over the years, as you start to kind of scrape at it, payments to me is starting to be very fascinating, because there's so many weird nuances. And now with kind of stable coins and the crypto space, it's going to get interesting. And that's where the money is. Yeah,
no, that's great. Well, okay, so let's say I've picked Germany as my target, and now I'm in there and I'm selling, and I'm I've found a fulfillment partner to help me, and I'm starting to market. Maybe I'm a year into this now in the journey. Do we just replicate? All right, France is next. I don't know, the entire EU is next, or elsewhere. Do you see brands going country by country, or do they just kind of take the whole the whole
like sniper
space?
shots?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So for example, if I'm understanding, basically the idea is there efficiencies and economies of scale by remaining geographically close, circa, I was going to say,
exactly,
or going splinter. The efficiencies specifically are going to be around logistics and inventory, unless you have a supply chain diversity too. But if it's all coming out of Asia, let's say, and you're going to Europe, there's no real efficiency or frankly, Europe or Australia. It's not efficiency of the supply chain, but where you place your inventory, and if you have a heavy product to ship, that can make a difference. So if you're in Germany and you're probably going to put warehouse in Germany, if that's where you're starting, yes, there's probably efficiencies and cost structures that make sense to stay within Europe. For example, in Netherlands, a lot of people put inventory into Netherlands and feed throughout for a lot of issues, not just logistics costs, but also tax issues that they have because they've planted their flag as the hub. So there are definitely efficiencies once you've established inventory. Also, inventory opportunity costs, where you're placing inventory in a market. Now you can't use it in another market, so you might as well really build out in Europe. So I think Europe, in a case to answer the question, is a good place to build efficiencies from a logistics and an inventory perspective. From a marketing perspective, I'm not entirely sure, because of the language issues. You still have to do just as much work as you might do from a marketing perspective as you might do into Quebec. But if you have inventory in Europe, you're in better shape. Mexico and Canada, also logistically, again, efficiencies there, not necessarily Canada versus Mexico, but you've got efficiencies. Australia is kind of an outlier. If you want to go to Australia, you've got to solve that inventory placement issue, and the shipping is always the number one issue for Australia. But
interesting.
But if you're snipering into, let's say, to use a lack of a better word, Korea, not a lot of efficiency. Say, well, now we're in Korea, I think we should also do Taiwan. I mean, again, that's my opinion, because logistically, you've already got it depends what you're sourcing, right? It depends on your product. So many issues.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Well, tell me, we mentioned Shopify, we've mentioned potentially Avalara. I guess if you're not on Shopify, you're going to be, you have, what other, I mean, my question is to get all the technologies.
Yeah,
What am I,
the tech or
yeah, the tech stack,
stack.
my international tech stack. What am I looking at?
Well, I mean, if you're big enough, you use an Avalara. I say big enough because if you're not, you still could do Shopify Global Markets and not build your own version of Global Markets, which is essentially Avalara under the hood. But so you can use, so Avalara is an important piece of this. You can use a Zonos, which is more of a light checkout duty and tax calculation. They don't do logistics. But they just the tech stack over that. Again, you solve a lot of that already with Shopify, but they have a little bit more robust. And if you're not on Shopify, Zonos is a good one. I like Airwallex for global payments if you're getting up to the point where you're transacting and you want to keep local bank accounts, in multiple currencies around the world. Payoneer, if you're doing payouts, that's a little redundant, but if you're doing payouts out of Amazon internationally, you should have a Payoneer account. That makes sense. They also have eBay. I think they do a bunch of them. In terms of the e-commerce platforms, again, Shopify sadly is like so much easier for the small and medium businesses. I say sadly only because I hate to only have one option. I used to work at BigCommerce. I think that's probably not a solution for most companies at this point. And I don't think Salesforce, all the other ones are expensive. And I think in today's day and age, the disruption has been that it's made it so commoditized. The idea of global plugins are all on Shopify. So I personally have multiple Shopify sites.
Yeah.
Squarespace will do it with some plugins if you're really on a small budget. But and I have a couple of those sites too. But and then for logistics, I haven't checked in with them recently, but Easy Ship, Shipping Easy, as you said, ShipBob, depending on how much inventory you have, because there's another hybrid now they're supposed to do for small and mediums. And then what other issues we have? MarTech, so marketing technology. So much stuff out there. It's so nuanced.
You could be using. You could just be using the same. Your Instagram account, your from an actual distribution of your marketing. Yeah,
you're right. It's not geographically specific. I'd say there's a company out of Australia called Blend AI that I know the founder of, and that's kind of an interesting direction that the whole MarTech is going, which is using AI to optimize your ad spend across multiple channels. That's something you'll probably be doing in the U.S. It's not unique to certain markets, but those are interesting tools. And then I would say, and then all the AI solutions, I'm playing around with ChatGPT versus Grok versus 50 other ones. I use a lot of CapCut for editing, but it's another Chinese company, and I'm trying to diversify. Canva I live on pretty much every 20 minutes. You know what I'm using a lot for B2B. I'm using Apollo lately. Apollo is a really great tool for scraping and then simultaneously marketing.
It's a good one. Yeah. Seamless.ai is another good one out there, similar to Apollo. But Apollo is pretty expansive. It's a good one.
Yeah. In fact, you just said the word similar though. So Similar Web, if you haven't used
Similar Web, right.
Similar Web's a great one. More than anything, here's the parallel I say with Similar Web. And I haven't used them in years, but I used to talk about them a lot. Similar Web, if you have a company, if you have a product, let's say rock climbing again, but you don't have statistically significant numbers for Similar Web to even trigger giving you an analysis. That doesn't mean you can't use Similar Web. If you were, for example, looking at France and you say, I want to go in and sell my product, and you look at Decathlon, Decathlon's one of the biggest, kind of like a Dick's Sports outside of the US. There's only one in the US, I think, in New York, but they're huge. If you can plug their URL into Similar Web, see where they're getting their traffic from, and say, hey, I should probably emulate that if I'm going after the same groups. So you can use it as a proxy for other competitors and then for yourself ultimately.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's a phenomenal. We'll put the whole list in there and let people make their own choices and test out what works well for them. I wanted to touch on this topic, and I don't want to be, we love to make sure things are as evergreen as possible and strategies. But at the time of this recording, tariff. The word tariff is a word, right, that has now come back into our vocabulary on a regular basis. One, could you explain the word tariff? I mean, I want to make sure everybody understands it. And then, just the implications, because if we are going to be in a global trade war, now and maybe into the future, this matters to, e-commerce, because if you're buying your goods from, overseas or even from Canada or Mexico and bringing them in, all this matters. Can you just touch on the definition and the ramifications of tariffs when they go up and down?
Okay, sure. Sure. I mean, in the layman, as we may or may not have caught on news, is a tariff essentially is a tax on imported goods. It's a tax, as people have been talking about. It's a tax really on the importer, if you will, that is meant to reduce the exporter's ability to export to a market. But at the end of the day, it's the import tax, right? What was the other part of
the
this?
Ramifications? Like, all right, so now it's gone from maybe 10% to 25%.
Yes.
I mean, it's gone up. So do I need to raise my prices? Do I need to
Yeah,
absorb it?
I'll give you a couple of examples of what's happened in the past when they've done this, which is evergreen in terms of the challenges, which is the components. So often people think of it as, a tariff means I'm no longer going to be able to buy a car from China. Sure, but there's a lot of other stuff, which is the cars you buy in the US are built off of a lot of components from China. So those are going to be tariff ridden as well. And that means your US made product that has components from China. We ran into this during COVID, right? You have buttons that are made or some weird, unique little piece that somehow is only made in China. And now the whole production is slowed down. I had a company that made ear headphones, they have ear headphones essentially. They have their headphones, the actual jack is made in China, but they're assembled in the US, great Pennsylvania company. They had to increase their cost by 25%. So ultimately they had to increase their price by 25% or weather it for a short period of time. But since we have such uncertainty as to how long this stuff is going to go on, most companies can't weather it. They have to pass it on. The bigger companies can weather it. So sadly, the bigger companies, ironically, may pay more, but they can also weather it and they survive, and the smaller ones get shaken out. So I think there's a challenge. There's another interesting ramification on a more global scale that I'd love to mention if you think it's possible. So, okay. The last time we did tariffs with China, it was amazing for the promotion of Chinese diversification. They have done such a great job since the last tariffs of finding really great inroads into Latin America. They've taken over. I lived in Mexico for 3 years during that trade war the last time, and I watched a ton of influx of Chinese goods. Now they've set up shop. Essentially, what they like to say, if you're familiar with China, is that Mexico is now the Shenzhen of the U.S. Essentially, basically, it's the manufacturing hub for Chinese manufacturers to sell into the U.S. and now Latin America. Not only for manufacturing have they moved, and of course we're going to try lots of pluggings of holes, but humans find a way. So we can say, we're going to stop everything that's assembled, but also components are from China. Yeah, okay. Good luck with that, because when somebody is starting to, they start to manufacture products in Mexico, they happen to be of Chinese origin, but now they're a Mexican citizen. What do we go around looking at them and saying, well, you look Chinese, I'm going to put a tariff on you. You're now Mexican, and humans find a way. Similarly, they found consumers outside. So we historically think that America has such a big power where our consumers are so important to the market. Well, China has had to diversify away from our consumer base, and they've done it successfully, frankly, more than we have.
Yeah, no, it's part of their 10-year plan. They're very, very, very smart, and taking some of these countries that people had almost, forgotten about in ways from an economic standpoint, and really made inroads and made investments in there, which are going to pay dividends. And now, it is fascinating. And I think you can either sit and complain about tariffs, or you can figure out what to do when tariffs, go up, and figure out how that affects your business. Should you absorb it, not absorb it? Definitely a great time to assess, I think.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, look, one way is if you can somehow figure it out where you manufacture in China and you start to look at, this is actually a great point around international. If you're selling into Europe, then you may not have to bring your product here. If you're tight enough with your manufacturing in, let's say, Asia, you can have them fulfill right out of their manufacturing to Europe, or sell wholesale, send wholesale into Europe. So you may avoid the whole US entirely. So that is an option. Uh, yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
That's interesting.
I've never been more concerned about the China US challenge when it comes to consumer goods and sales than I have today. We have forced them to diversify prematurely before we actually ourselves are really diversifying, and they're going after markets that we historically have ignored, like Latin America, and their price point, everything fits better, and we're in trouble.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's a fascinating time, and it is rapidly changing.
Yes.
So stay tuned, I guess. So Josh, as we wrap up, I always like to ask one question. We touched on AI, but I'm always curious. So you use it, I'm guessing, probably every single day for some parts of your business, maybe even personal lives, to-do lists, whatever. What's one thing that maybe you did in ChatGPT or Claude that made you stop and say, "Wow, like I can't believe that does that. It's amazing."
Well, every day I have something that I just can't believe they did. One thing that I thought was interesting, it's super minutia, but I exported a CSV file from a bunch of scraping for target B2B clients from Apollo, right? So if you're familiar, anybody's familiar with marketing, you have a scraping tool that gives you 1,000 potential names, and they put it in their format. And then I had to upload it to Fair. If you're familiar with Fair, the B2B platform, Fair has its own template. So I downloaded the template from Fair. I put that in with the scraping format. I didn't touch any of the two documents. I put it into AI and I said, could you please take all of these contacts and put it in the right format and make a table that's downloadable for me to upload it to Fair? And within less than a minute, I had already reformatted 2 Excels to merge them to put it in the right format for Fair. That I did yesterday. That was really neat.
That is amazing. I mean, that would have taken you probably, I don't know, several hours to...
hours, or calling some assistant to kind of try to go do that for me and having to explain it, and then having a field be wrong. So that's what. Another thing I use, obviously everyone uses regularly, is we're doing a big webinar next week on U.S. adventure travel for Southeast Asian tour operators. And I had to, every new speaker has to have a speaker announcement, and I just plug it in, and I just put their LinkedIn link now, and it'll scrape their LinkedIn without even, I don't even have to write what I think or take their bio. Just give me the bio for this person. That's pretty neat.
Sure. I mean, you'd be surprised how much LinkedIn knows about you, Josh.
I'm sure. We should do that too. I want to do that. Exactly.
Absolutely. Well, Josh, this has been great. I mean, this is, I think just one of those things that I've always wondered myself. I expanded into Canada, and that's as far as I got in my business. But what does that world look like? And you've done a great job of explaining the technologies, the opportunities, the risks as well, and then some of the challenges that come with it. And I appreciate you coming on and talking. You are definitely an expert. Tell everybody about Vanbassador really quickly, because that is an awesome. And are you still doing it? Are you still out there?
I do it. It's hard to justify. I've got a family and it's not COVID anymore, and I should probably be at the office and stuff like that. So I'm not as often there, but yeah, it's essentially, I travel around asking companies how they're staying local, going global, and just telling stories around that. It gets you out there. The one thing that I would say, the initial intention of this has not yet manifested, which is to bring influencers, creators in certain spaces from one country to the US to work with a similar category, let's say wine or surfing or skiing, and then traveling with them on a road trip together, videotaping that, stopping in on companies along the way. I'd love to do that, as typically as the essence of the name Vanbassador is bringing the world together by taking the audiences in disparate markets and having them, through the person they follow, experience each other. And that, I think the world needs that more than anything. The one thing that I'm doing now that's more actionable in that regard is going after the younger market with Culture Agents, which is the comic book that you mentioned earlier. that I'm super excited about. We're launching the Unity Code comic book, which is a global version of that, because I was doing one between China and the US for the last 10 years. And if you check it out, cultureagents.com, and if you ever anyone wants a free digital copy, I can send one out. But we'll be launching that. And it's really cool. I brought 4 different artists and illustrators from Kenya, China, Colombia, and the US together. And we created something that they fight Xeno and the xenophobes who are spreading fear, ignorance, and arrogance throughout the world. And sadly enough, I thought it was really important 9 years ago, and it's even more important now. So.
Yeah, I love it. That's a great idea. And just before we got, what does a diplomat do?
Yeah. Well, according to Elon Musk, it does nothing. When we're getting rid of them all. So it was something back in the day, back in 2024, there was something called a diplomat and a foreign service. First of all, if we really want to get into it, the word diplomat is a universal for anybody overseas working in a official government capacity. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're doing what we consider really a diplomat doing. So, for example, I might be on a diplomatic passport because I'm a construction worker building the embassy in a market. But essentially, the diplomatic corps, which we really call the foreign service, is the State Department. And what they do is like diplomacy, they'll sit there and talk to, I'll give you some examples in a second. The other agency would be the Department of Commerce, which up till now has a diplomatic corps, which is the foreign service for commercial service, which is where I was. They deal with business, and then business as a form of diplomacy or as a function of getting businesses overseas. And then you have the agricultural department, which first focuses on saying, hey, why is China banning U.S. beef? Let's go to battle at that. And let's deal with specific ways of doing promotional events for Washington State apples. It overlaps with the U.S. Trade Representative's Office that does the trade deals like the U.S. beef and the USMCA and all that stuff. There's way too many agencies related to trade, I believe. I believe we should massively reduce the redundancy and aggregate them under one umbrella. I have a whole paper on it if anyone listening wants to see it. But so far, nobody has paid attention, although Project 2025 speaks about it. I am apolitical, but there is something to be said for reducing redundancy in trade. To answer the question about diplomacy, though, on a daily basis, when I work with Harley Davidson, for example, in China, there was a regulation where they didn't want to have certain levels of engines within the third ring road of the center of the city in Beijing. So I might meet with the Ministry of Transportation and say, hey, there's some really good sustainability value to having Harley Davidson be allowed to operate within there and reducing the cars and the pollution. Do I fundamentally think that the world needs more very loud Harley Davidsons inside the city? That is not a question. That is not my job. My job was to help promote the U.S. business so that it generates U.S. jobs in America. That was the commercial service. The State Department similarly will work with, will help. I know this is more answer than you wanted, but will help the congressional leaders that want to understand the relationship with us and Mexico. They will organize delegations to be that. Somebody has to be the bilateral kind of glue that when you land on the ground, all these people who say, I know what's going on in the Ukraine. They only know this because we have people on the ground, not as much right now, but in certain markets that are there on a daily basis, making the connections, dealing with going to the conferences for every weird nuanced product and category we have. So that's
wow. It's very interesting. Well, Josh, it's been great. Yeah. Thank you very much for coming on. Tell everybody, where they can find you. We'll put everything in the show notes, sure. Where they can connect with you.
Yeah, you just follow, you can follow me on the Vanbassador at Vanbassador, or you can go to, go to my LinkedIn or go to gettingtoglobal.org, or you just talk to Raman. Just watch his, follow him and follow his show notes.
I appreciate that. Well, I've seen you in action. I've seen you do live presentations. You're great at doing them. So if anything's out there that you've done, I encourage people to watch and learn, and especially if you're looking to expand into international markets, this is perfect. So Josh, thank you for making the time today. I hope the rest of your week is awesome, and all your presentations come out beautifully, and that book does incredible too. And we'll make sure we promote it in the show notes as well. All right.
Thanks a lot, man. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right, that brings us to the end of another episode of the E-commerce Revolution podcast. Don't forget to check out past episodes, which are all available on demand on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. Ready to join the revolution? Become an exclusive part of our growing community of emerging e-commerce entrepreneurs at ecomrevolution.co. Until next time, see ya.